My brother-in-law Daniel stood across from my wife in that courthouse hallway, his $800 an hour attorney smirking beside him, and said the words that still make my blood boil. "You really think you can win without a lawyer, Sarah? You're about to get destroyed in there." What he didn't know was that the black-robed judge walking toward courtroom 3B was about to recognize her own daughter. And what I discovered in the 72 hours leading up to that moment exposed a conspiracy so twisted, it didn't just threaten our family, it had already destroyed 3 others. Before I tell you what happened when that gavel dropped, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? Because what happened next in that Denver courthouse changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. It started 3 weeks earlier on a Tuesday morning in Morrison, Colorado. I'm Marcus Webb, 38 years old, senior forensic accountant at Highland & Associates. I spend my days tracing money through corporate labyrinths, finding the numbers that don't add up. 20 years of experience taught me that when financial records don't make sense, someone's lying. I just never thought I'd be using those skills on my own family. My wife Sarah and I had been married for 6 years. She's a 3rd-grade teacher at Bear Creek Elementary, the kind of woman who spends her own money on classroom supplies and stays late to tutor struggling kids. Her father, Robert Hendricks, passed away 14 months ago from pancreatic cancer. He'd been a commercial real estate developer in Denver, successful enough to leave behind a sizable estate. The kind of estate that makes people's true nature come crawling out of the woodwork. Robert's will was straightforward. Everything split 3 ways between his children: Sarah, her older brother Daniel, and her younger sister Michelle. The family home in Cherry Creek, worth $2.3 million. Commercial properties throughout Denver totaling another $8.7 million. Investment accounts, life insurance, personal assets, the whole estate valued at roughly $14 million. Each child should have received approximately $4.6 million. Should have. That Tuesday morning, Sarah was at the kitchen table when I came down for coffee. She wasn't crying, but her hands were shaking as she held a legal document. The early October sunlight streaming through our Littleton ranch house windows made the papers look almost innocent. "Marcus," she said quietly, "Daniel's suing me." I took the papers. Hendricks versus Hendricks. Daniel was filing a lawsuit claiming Sarah had unduly influenced their father before his death, manipulated him into changing his will, and stolen Michelle's portion of the inheritance. He was demanding Sarah return $6.2 million to the estate immediately. This is insane. I sat down across from her. "Sarah, you barely saw your dad those last 6 months. You were teaching full-time. I was with you every evening." "I know." Her voice was steady, but I could see the fear. Daniel's claiming I visited Dad secretly at the hospice facility, that I convinced him to cut Michelle out and give me her share. Did Michelle get cut out? No. She got exactly what the will specified, $4.6 million, same as Daniel and me. But Daniel's saying Dad originally planned to give her more, and I interfered. Sarah pushed another document across the table. He's also claiming I forged Dad's signature on a property deed transfer 2 months before he died. The document showed a transfer of a commercial building in Lodo, Denver's lower downtown district, from Robert Hendricks to Sarah Hendricks Webb. Property value, $1.8 million. Transfer date, June 15th, 2 months before Robert entered hospice care. "Did you know about this transfer?" I asked carefully. "No." Sarah met my eyes. "I've never seen this document before yesterday. Marcus, I didn't forge anything. I don't even want the building. But Daniel's lawyer is saying I manipulated Dad when he was vulnerable, forged his signature, and now I'm trying to cheat the family." I studied the document with my forensic accountant's eye. Something felt wrong. The signature looked right, but the notary seal seemed off. The paper quality didn't match other documents from that time period. And the transfer date, June 15th, that was significant. "Where were you June 15th? I asked. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling back through her calendar. "Chicago. That was the week of my teacher's conference. I was gone Tuesday through Saturday." "So you have proof you weren't even in Colorado when this document was supposedly signed?" "Hotel receipts, flight records, conference registration. All of it." I felt that familiar tingle, the one I get when I'm looking at cooked books and the pattern starts revealing itself. Sarah, who benefits if you're forced to return $6.2 million to the estate? Daniel and Michelle would split it. And who's filed this lawsuit? Just Daniel. Michelle hasn't. Sarah stopped. Michelle hasn't said anything. She hasn't even called me since Daniel filed. 3 weeks ago, that seemed like simple family drama. A greedy brother, a forged document, a case of he said she said that would get sorted out in court. But I'm a forensic accountant. I don't believe in coincidences. And when I started digging into Daniel Hendricks' financials, what I found made me realize this wasn't just a family dispute. This was part of a pattern. And my wife was target number 4. That night, after Sarah went to bed, I did what I do best. I followed the money. Daniel Hendricks, 42 years old, lived in a $3.2 million house in Cherry Hills Village. He drove a Range Rover and a Porsche 911. His wife Claudia wore clothes that cost more than our monthly mortgage. On paper, Daniel was a successful business consultant. His company, Hendricks Strategic Solutions, claimed to help family businesses navigate succession planning and estate transitions. Sounds legitimate, right? That's what it's designed to sound like. I started with public records. Colorado's business database showed Daniel had formed his consulting company 4 years ago. Before that, he'd worked in commercial real estate like his father. But there was a 2-year gap in his employment history, 2016 to 2018, where I couldn't find any tax returns or business activity. I cross-referenced his current client list against probate court records. Here's what I found. Client 1, the Morrison family. Daniel consulted for them in 2019 during a patriarch's terminal illness. 6 months after the death, the eldest son sued his siblings claiming undue influence and forged documents. Settlement, $2.1 million redistributed. Daniel received a $180,000 consulting fee. Client 2, the Patterson estate. Daniel worked with them in 2020. Father died of Alzheimer's. Immediately after, the oldest daughter sued her brother claiming forged power of attorney documents. Settlement, $3.4 million redistributed. Daniel's fee, $275,000. Client 3, the Chin family. Daniel consulted in 2021. Mother died of cancer. Within weeks, one son sued his sister claiming she'd manipulated their mother and forged estate documents. Case was settled out of court. Amount sealed, but court records showed Daniel received a payment of $190,000. 3 families. 3 terminal illnesses. 3 lawsuits filed by Daniel's clients claiming forged documents and undue influence. 3 massive settlements. And 3 substantial fees paid to Daniel Hendricks. Now it was our turn. I sat back from my computer, my coffee gone cold. This wasn't random family conflict. This was Daniel's business model. He identified wealthy families dealing with terminal illness, positioned himself as a helpful consultant, then manufactured legal disputes that resulted in his clients receiving larger inheritances. The legal fees and settlements were just the cost of doing business. But there was something else. Something that didn't quite fit. I pulled Daniel's financial records again, looking deeper. His consulting fees were substantial, over $600,000 in the past 3 years, but his expenses were even higher. The Cherry Hills house had a mortgage of $2.8 million. Credit card statements showed monthly expenditures averaging $45,000. Car payments, country club dues, private school for his kids, Claudia's shopping habits. Daniel was spending roughly $650,000 a year. He was living beyond even his inflated means. Then I found it. Hidden in a labyrinth of LLC filings and business transfers, Daniel had a silent partner. Someone who'd helped him form Hendricks Strategic Solutions. Someone who'd been listed as a 40% owner until the paperwork was quietly amended 6 months ago to remove their name. The partner's name was Marcus Chin. The same last name as Client 3. I spent the next hour tracing Marcus Chin's background. He wasn't related to the Chin family Daniel had helped. He was a disbarred attorney. Lost his license in 2018 for witness tampering and fabricating evidence in an estate dispute case. The end of that mysterious gap in Daniel's employment history. My hands were shaking as I printed everything. Daniel hadn't just copied a successful business model. He'd partnered with a disbarred attorney who specialized in manufacturing fake estate disputes. They'd done this at least 3 times before. And now they were doing it to Sarah. But I still didn't know why Daniel was living so far above his means, or what had happened to make Marcus Chin suddenly disappear from the business paperwork 6 months ago. Those answers would come later, and they would be worse than anything I'd imagined. At 2:30 a.m., I heard Sarah get up. I found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone. "Can't sleep?" I asked. Michelle finally texted back. Sarah showed me the message. "I don't want to be in the middle of this. Daniel says you stole from the family. Just give back what isn't yours and this can end." "She believes him," Sarah whispered. "My own sister thinks I'm a thief." I pulled her close. "Sarah, I found something. Daniel's done this before, 3 times. He manufactures these disputes, his clients sue their siblings, everyone settles, and Daniel collects huge fees. This is his business model." Sarah pulled back, searching my face. "You're saying he forged that property deed? Created fake evidence to sue me?" "I'm saying he's got a pattern. And I'm going to prove it." Marcus, his lawyer, is Thomas Brennan. He's one of the top estate attorneys in Colorado. Even if you're right, how do we fight someone like that without our own lawyer? I called 6 firms today. The retainer alone is $50,000, and they're saying this could cost $200,000 to litigate. We don't have that kind of money. She was right. We had some savings equity in our house, but not liquid cash for a prolonged legal battle. And that's exactly what Daniel was counting on. Overwhelm Sarah with legal firepower, force her to settle just to make it stop. "We'll figure it out," I said, though I had no idea how. What I didn't know yet was that Sarah had already figured it out. And her solution was sitting on the bench of Denver District Court, waiting to hear a case that would expose everything. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks out, October 24th at 9 a.m. Sarah spent those weeks trying to find affordable legal representation while I worked my day job and spent every night building our case. I documented Daniel's pattern, collected evidence of Marcus Chen's involvement, traced the financial trail. But Sarah couldn't find a lawyer willing to take the case for what we could afford. The ones who believed her wanted retainers we couldn't pay. The ones we could afford didn't believe in her case enough to take it on contingency. 1 week before the hearing, Sarah came home with an odd expression on her face. "I'm going to represent myself," she said. "Sarah, that's..." "I know. It's crazy. But I've been reading everything I can about estate law. I've watched hours of courtroom proceedings. I've prepared all our evidence. Marcus, I'm a teacher. I've stood in front of rooms full of skeptical 8-year-olds for 15 years. I can stand in front of a judge. Daniel's going to destroy you. His lawyer is expecting me to fold. He's expecting me to be intimidated. But you know what? I've got the truth. I've got your evidence. And I've got nothing to lose." Her jaw set in that stubborn way I'd learned meant there was no talking her out of it. "I'm doing this." The morning of October 24th was crisp and cold, typical Denver autumn. We drove downtown in silence, Sarah reviewing her notes while I tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The Lindsay Flanagan courthouse rose against the blue sky, all glass and steel, imposing and impersonal. We arrived at 8:30, giving us time to find Courtroom 3B and settle our nerves. As we walked through security, I saw Daniel across the lobby. He wore a $3,000 suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. Beside him stood Thomas Brennan, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than our car payment. They saw us approaching. Daniel's face broke into a smug smile. "Sarah," he called out, his voice carrying across the marble lobby, "is Marcus your lawyer now? Or are you really going to try this alone?" Thomas Brennan actually laughed. "Mr. Webb, as a CPA, you should know better than to let your wife represent herself in a complex estate litigation. This is embarrassing." Sarah's hand tightened on her folder, but her voice was steady. "I'll see you in court, Daniel." As we turned away, I heard Brennan mutter to Daniel, "This will be over by lunch. She'll settle the moment I put our documentation on the record." We found courtroom 3B on the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty except for a few other people waiting for different cases. Sarah and I sat on the wooden bench outside, reviewing her opening statement one more time. At 8:55, a bailiff emerged. "Hendricks versus Hendricks? Judge is ready." We stood, my heart hammering. As we walked toward the courtroom door, I saw Daniel and Thomas Brennan coming down the hall, still laughing about something. They were so confident, so certain of their victory. They had no idea what was about to happen. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. The judge's bench sat elevated at the front, empty for the moment. 2 tables faced it, plaintiffs on the left, defendants on the right. We took our seats at the defendant's table while Daniel and Brennan settled in across from us. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding." I stood automatically, then felt Sarah go rigid beside me. My eyes snapped to the doorway where the judge was entering. She was in her mid-60s, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, black robes crisp and formal. Her face was professionally neutral as she moved to the bench. Then her eyes swept the courtroom, landing on Sarah. I watched shock, recognition, and something like fury flash across her face in less than a second. She schooled her expression immediately, but I'd seen it. And based on the sudden tension in Sarah's body beside me, she'd seen it too. Judge Patricia Hendricks was Sarah's mother. The mother who'd divorced Robert when Sarah was 16. The mother who'd moved to California and gradually lost touch with her children. The mother Sarah hadn't spoken to in over 3 years, not since a painful phone call where hard words were exchanged. The mother Daniel apparently had no idea was now a district court judge in Denver. "Please be seated," Judge Hendricks said, her voice carrying the authority of the bench. She opened the case file, her face revealing nothing. "Hendricks versus Hendricks. Before we begin, I need to address a potential conflict of interest." Here it comes, I thought. She's going to recuse herself. "Mr. Brennan, counselor for the plaintiff," Judge Hendricks continued. "Are you aware that the defendant, Sarah Hendricks Webb, is my daughter?" The courtroom went absolutely silent. I watched the color drain from Daniel's face. Thomas Brennan stood slowly, clearly struggling to process this information. "Your Honor, no, we were not aware of that relationship." "I see." Judge Hendricks looked at Sarah. "Ms. Webb, do you wish to file a motion for my recusal based on our familial relationship?" Sarah stood, her voice clear. "No, Your Honor. I trust in your ability to be impartial." "Mr. Brennan? Does the plaintiff wish to file such a motion?" I watched Daniel grab Brennan's arm, whispering frantically. Brennan shook his head, then addressed the court. "Your Honor, we would like a moment to consult with our client." "5 minutes. We'll reconvene shortly." Judge Hendricks stood and left the bench. The moment she disappeared through the back door, Daniel exploded. His whispered fury carried across the quiet courtroom. "Her mother? Her mother is the judge? This is a setup." "Keep your voice down," Brennan hissed. "We have options. We can request a different judge." "How long will that take?" "Maybe months to get a new hearing date." "I need this resolved now." "The settlement money," Daniel stopped abruptly, catching himself. But I'd heard enough. The settlement money. He needed cash immediately. That explained the urgent timeline, the aggressive legal strategy. Daniel wasn't just running his usual scam. He was desperate. When Judge Hendricks returned, Brennan stood. "Your Honor, the plaintiff does not move for recusal at this time. However, we ask that the court be especially mindful of any appearance of bias given the relationship." "Noted, Counselor. And I assure you, I am fully capable of setting aside personal matters to rule on the law and evidence alone." Judge Hendricks settled back into her seat. "Now, this is a preliminary hearing to determine if there is sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Mr. Brennan, you may present your opening statement." What followed was a masterclass in legal manipulation. Brennan laid out Daniel's case with precision, Sarah had isolated their father during his final months, manipulated him into signing documents transferring property, and forged his signature when manipulation didn't work. He presented the Lodo property deed transfer as Exhibit A, clear evidence of forgery and fraud. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Sarah Webb was in Chicago on June 15 when this document claims to have been signed in Denver, Brennan said smoothly. But what the defendant won't tell you is that she had her father sign blank documents weeks earlier, which she later filled in and notarized fraudulently. This is a clear case of elder abuse and estate fraud. When he sat down, looking supremely satisfied, Judge Hendricks turned to Sarah. Ms. Webb, your response? Sarah stood, and I saw her hands trembling slightly as she gripped her notes. But when she spoke, her teacher's voice came through, clear, confident, commanding attention. Your Honor, my brother's case relies on a single forged document and a pattern of lies. I was in Chicago on June 15, as Mr. Brennan acknowledged. I have hotel receipts, flight records, and conference attendance records proving I was 1,000 miles away when this deed was supposedly signed. I never asked my father to sign blank documents. I never manipulated him. And I certainly never forged his signature. She paused, meeting her mother's eyes. But what Mr. Brennan won't tell you is that my brother has done this exact same thing 3 times before. He's sued 3 other families using the exact same playbook, claim a sibling forged documents, manufacture evidence, force a settlement. Each time, he's collected massive fees. This isn't about our father's estate. This is about Daniel's business model. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Webb, Judge Hendricks said neutrally. Do you have evidence to support it? Yes, Your Honor. My husband has documented everything. Judge Hendricks turned to me. Mr. Webb, you're not an attorney of record here. No, Your Honor. I'm a forensic accountant. And with your permission, I'd like to explain what we've discovered about Daniel Hendricks' pattern of estate fraud. I saw Brennan start to object, but Judge Hendricks held up a hand. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if there's sufficient evidence for trial. I'll allow it. Proceed, Mr. Webb. For the next 20 minutes, I walked the court through everything I'd found. The 3 previous families. The forged documents in each case. The settlements that enriched Daniel's clients. The consulting fees he collected. I presented bank records, court documents, corporate filings. Then I dropped the bomb. Your Honor, Daniel Hendricks has a silent partner. A disbarred attorney named Marcus Chen who lost his license in 2018 for fabricating evidence in an estate case. Chen helped Daniel form his consulting business, and together they've manufactured at least 3 previous estate disputes. The document claiming my wife forged her father's signature? It follows the exact same pattern as documents fabricated in the Morrison, Patterson, and Chin cases. Daniel was on his feet. This is ridiculous. Marcus Chin is a former business acquaintance, nothing more. We dissolved our partnership months ago. This is a desperate attempt to distract from Sarah's crimes. Sit down, Mr. Hendricks, Judge Hendricks said sharply. You'll have your opportunity to respond. She turned back to me. Mr. Webb, do you have documentation connecting Mr. Chin to this current case? Not directly, Your Honor. But I can show the pattern. The same notary seal appears on forged documents in all 3 previous cases and on the deed Sarah allegedly signed. The same paper stock. The same signature irregularities. Someone with expertise in fabricating estate documents created all 4 forgeries. I placed enlarged copies of all 4 documents on the easel we'd brought. The notary seals were identical, small imperfections in the exact same places. The signature styles matched. Anyone with forensic document experience could see they came from the same source. Your Honor, Brennan interjected, this is nothing but conspiracy theories and innuendo. The fact remains that property was transferred from Robert Hendricks to Sarah Webb 2 months before his death. If Ms. Webb didn't forge the documents, then Robert signed them willingly, which means she did manipulate her dying father. Actually, there's a third option, Sarah said quietly. The documents are completely fabricated. My father never signed them. I never received any property transfer. This is a fake deed created to manufacture a lawsuit. That's absurd, Daniel said. Why would I fabricate evidence against my own sister? Sarah turned to face him directly. Because you need $6.2 million immediately. You're drowning in debt, Daniel. Your mortgage, your cars, Claudia's spending, you're burning through $650,000 a year on a consulting business that's actually a criminal enterprise. Thought you could force me to settle, collect another big fee, and solve your financial crisis. You didn't count on Mom being assigned to this case. And you definitely didn't count on Marcus being a forensic accountant. The courtroom was dead silent. I watched Daniel's face cycle through emotions: shock, anger, calculation. Then something shifted. His shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him. Your Honor, Brennan said, clearly trying to salvage the situation. Without concrete proof that these documents were fabricated by my client. The proof is in the pattern, I interrupted. 3 previous cases with identical forgery signatures. A disbarred attorney specializing in evidence fabrication. Financial records showing Daniel desperate for cash. And most importantly, the deed itself. I pulled out my final piece of evidence. Your Honor, I sent the deed to an independent forensic document examiner. Her report shows the notary seal is fake. It's a photocopy of a real seal from a notary who retired in 2019. The signature doesn't match Robert Hendricks' actual signature from that time period. It matches his signature from 2015, before his illness changed his handwriting. And the paper contains fiber markers that place its manufacture in late 2023, months after Robert's death. I placed the examiner's report on the judge's bench. This document was created recently and backdated to June 15th. It's complete fabrication. Judge Hendricks reviewed the report in silence. When she looked up, her expression was carved from ice. Mr. Brennan, does your client wish to respond to these allegations? Daniel and Brennan went into a huddle, whispering frantically. I could see the calculation happening. Continue with the lawsuit and risk criminal charges for evidence fabrication? Or cut their losses and retreat? Finally, Brennan stood. Your Honor, in light of these unexpected developments, my client wishes to withdraw the complaint without prejudice. Without prejudice? Sarah said sharply. You dragged me through 3 weeks of hell, accuse me of forging documents and elder abuse, nearly destroy my reputation, and you want to just walk away? Your Honor, I want this case dismissed with prejudice. I want it on the record that these accusations were baseless. And I want sanctions against Mr. Hendricks for filing a frivolous lawsuit with fabricated evidence. Judge Hendricks nodded slowly. Ms. Webb makes valid points. Mr. Brennan, your client has presented what appears to be falsified evidence in a case designed to defraud Ms. Webb of her rightful inheritance. Simply withdrawing the complaint doesn't address the serious allegations of fabricated documents and a pattern of estate fraud. Your Honor, we would need time to investigate these allegations. Time. Judge Hendricks' voice could have frozen fire. Mr. Brennan, you filed this lawsuit 3 weeks ago with what you claimed was ironclad evidence. Now that evidence has been thoroughly debunked, and a clear pattern of similar fabrications has been documented, the time for investigation was before you filed. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Hendricks, I'm going to ask you directly under oath. Did you fabricate the property deed that forms the basis of your lawsuit against your sister? Daniel's face had gone gray. Brennan grabbed his arm, but Daniel shook him off. He looked at Sarah, then at Judge Hendricks, then at me. I saw the moment he made his choice. I want to speak with my attorney privately before answering that question, Your Honor. That's your right. We'll take a 30-minute recess. Mr. Hendricks, I strongly suggest you consult with Mr. Brennan about the consequences of perjury and evidence fabrication. Judge Hendricks stood. Court is in recess. The moment she left the bench, Sarah grabbed my hand. We did it. Marcus, we actually... Don't celebrate yet, I whispered. If Daniel admits to fabricating evidence, this becomes a criminal matter. And if he doesn't, we might still have to prove our case at trial. But I had underestimated the power of the trap we'd set. Because during that 30-minute recess, while Sarah and I waited nervously in the hallway, Daniel Hendricks made a phone call that would bring his entire operation crashing down. When we returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed. Daniel sat hunched at the plaintiff's table, his expensive suit somehow looking cheaper. Brennan's face was professionally blank, but I could see tension in his shoulders. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and Judge Hendricks returned to the bench. "Mr. Hendricks, have you had sufficient time to consult with counsel?" Daniel stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you prepared to answer my question regarding the fabrication of evidence?" There was a long pause. "Then, Your Honor, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and decline to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me." The courtroom erupted. Sarah gasped beside me. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel once, sharply. "Order. Mr. Brennan, I assume you're moving to withdraw from this case." "Yes, Your Honor. I was not aware of any evidence fabrication. If my client refuses to answer questions about the authenticity of the primary evidence, I cannot ethically continue representation." Motion granted. "Mr. Hendricks, you now have two options. You may proceed pro se, representing yourself, or you may find new counsel. However, I'm issuing an immediate order freezing any settlement discussions or property transfers related to Robert Hendricks' estate pending investigation into these allegations." Judge Hendricks' voice was steel. "Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for possible criminal charges related to evidence fabrication, perjury, and estate fraud." Daniel's face went white. "Your Honor, You should stop talking, Mr. Hendricks. Anything you say right now can and will be used against you in criminal proceedings." Judge Hendricks turned to Sarah. "Ms. Webb, as defendant, do you wish to pursue sanctions or damages against your brother for filing this fraudulent lawsuit?" Sarah stood. For a moment, she looked at Daniel, really looked at him. I wondered if she was seeing the brother she'd grown up with, or the stranger who tried to steal her inheritance. "No, Your Honor. I don't want his money. I just want this dismissed with prejudice so it's clear I did nothing wrong. And I want my father's estate distributed exactly as he intended." Judge Hendricks nodded. "The complaint is dismissed with prejudice. The court finds no credible evidence that Ms. Webb engaged in elder abuse, undue influence, or document fabrication. The allegations were baseless and appear to have been made in bad faith." She looked at Daniel. "Mr. Hendricks, you're fortunate your sister is more forgiving than this court. I'm recommending full prosecution for evidence fabrication and estate fraud. Bailiff, please coordinate with the DA's office." As the gavel fell, ending the hearing, I watched years of Daniel's schemes collapse in seconds. Thomas Brennan was already gathering his things, distancing himself from the disaster. Daniel sat frozen, the reality of what he'd done finally sinking in. Sarah turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "It's over. It's really over." But it wasn't over. What happened in the hallway afterward revealed the final, darkest piece of Daniel's conspiracy. We stepped out of the courtroom into organized chaos. Two people I didn't recognize stood with a woman in a business suit, clearly law enforcement. As Daniel emerged behind us, one of the men stepped forward. "Daniel Hendricks?" He flashed a badge. "Detective Mike Torres, Denver Police Economic Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you about your business dealings with Marcus Chin." Daniel's face went from white to green. "I'm not speaking without an attorney." "That's your right. But you should know that Marcus Chen was arrested this morning at his home in Boulder. He's cooperating fully with our investigation into a multi-state estate fraud ring." Detective Torres pulled out a tablet. "He's given us detailed information about your operation, Mr. Hendricks. Names, dates, dollar amounts. The Morrison family, the Patterson estate, the Chin family, we have documentation of all of it." "Chen's lying to save himself," Daniel said desperately. "I haven't worked with him in months." "Really?" "Because phone records show 4-7 calls between you two in the past 6 weeks. Bank records show you paid him $25,000 on September 30th, 1 week before you filed this lawsuit against your sister." Torres glanced at his notes. "That payment was for consulting services, but Chin says it was payment for fabricating the property deed you submitted to this court." The detective turned to Sarah and me. "Mrs. Webb, Mr. Webb, we'll need statements from both of you." Your documentation of Mr. Hendricks' pattern was instrumental in breaking this case. As they led Daniel away, not in handcuffs, not yet, but clearly in custody, Sarah's mother emerged from the courthouse. Judge Patricia Hendricks had removed her robes, standing in a simple gray suit that somehow made her look both more human and more formidable. She and Sarah stared at each other across 10 feet of hallway that might as well have been miles. "Mom," Sarah finally said. "Sarah." Patricia's voice was carefully neutral. "I didn't know you'd be in my courtroom today. The case file just said Hendricks versus Hendricks. I assumed it was a different family. I didn't know you were back in Colorado. When did you?" 18 months ago. Took a position with the district court." Patricia glanced toward where Daniel had been led away. "I knew he was troubled. I didn't know he was criminal." The silence stretched. Years of hurt and distance hanging between them. "Why didn't you recuse yourself?" Sarah asked quietly. "You could have. Should have, probably." Patricia Hendricks met her daughter's eyes. "Because the moment I saw Daniel's lawyer smirking in that hallway, telling you that you'd get destroyed without representation, I knew exactly what your brother was doing. I've seen it before, wealthy family member using legal intimidation to steal from relatives who can't afford to fight back." She paused. "And because you're my daughter, I wasn't going to let him destroy you without at least hearing the truth. The truth is, I haven't spoken to you in 3 years, Mom. We said things. I know. I remember every word." Patricia's professional facade cracked slightly. "I was wrong, Sarah. About your father, about staying in California, about letting our relationship drift. When he got sick, I should have come back. I should have been here for you." Sarah's tears were falling freely now. "I needed you. When Dad died, when Daniel started this lawsuit, I needed my mom, and you were. I was too proud and too scared to reach out. I thought you hated me for leaving." Patricia stepped closer. "Today, seeing you stand up there without a lawyer, defending yourself against your own brother? Sarah, I have never been more proud. You were brilliant. I had Marcus. He found everything, built the whole case. You had courage," Patricia corrected. "And integrity. You could have settled, taken what Daniel offered just to make it go away. Instead, you fought. Just like your father taught you." They stood there, mother and daughter, separated by years of hurt but connected by something stronger. Finally, Sarah crossed the distance and hugged her mother. Patricia held her tight, and I turned away to give them privacy, my own eyes suspiciously wet. 2 months later, we all stood in the same courthouse for a very different hearing. The criminal trial of Daniel Hendricks and Marcus Chin started in December and lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of their estate fraud scheme. 4 families testified about how Daniel had manipulated them during their grief, manufactured legal disputes, and stolen millions through fabricated evidence and forced settlements. Chen had indeed cooperated, providing detailed testimony about how they'd created fake documents, bribed a notary to forge seals, and calculated which families to target based on estate values and family dynamics. In exchange for his testimony, Chen received a reduced sentence of 7 years. Daniel got 15 years. No parole eligibility for at least 8. His wife Claudia filed for divorce before the trial even ended. The Cherry Hills house went into foreclosure. The Range Rover and Porsche were seized. Everything Daniel had built on a foundation of stolen money and fabricated evidence crumbled to nothing. Michelle, Sarah's younger sister, finally reached out 2 weeks after the criminal trial ended. She apologized for believing Daniel, for not standing by Sarah when it mattered. It would take time, but they were rebuilding their relationship. As for Sarah's inheritance, the probate court cleared everything. The Lodo property deed was officially declared fraudulent and removed from the record. Sarah received exactly what her father intended, her 1/3 share of his estate. She donated $50,000 of it to establish a legal defense fund for families facing estate fraud. Today, Sarah and I sat in our Littleton living room with Sarah's mother, my mother-in-law, Patricia, drinking coffee and watching snow fall outside. It was February, 4 months since that morning in Courtroom 3B. "Marcus," Patricia said, setting down her mug. I owe you an apology. When Sarah married you, I was in California, dealing with my own issues. I never got to know you properly. But what you did for my daughter, the way you believed her, fought for her, built that case, you saved her life. I just followed the numbers, I said. That's what I do. You followed your instincts, Patricia corrected. You saw a pattern where others would have seen coincidence. That's a gift. Sarah leaned against my shoulder. He's always been good at seeing what others miss. Except when I'm hinting I want him to do the dishes. We all laughed and it felt good. Normal. Like a family that had been broken was slowly healing. Later, after Patricia left, Sarah and I cleaned up the coffee cups together. Do you think Daniel ever really cared about any of us? She asked quietly. Or were we always just assets to him? I thought about the man I'd watched over those months. The desperation beneath his expensive suits. The calculation behind every family dinner. I think he cared once. When we were all kids. But somewhere along the way, he decided money mattered more than people. And once you make that choice, it's hard to come back from it. Do you think he regrets it? Now that he's lost everything? Probably. But I think he regrets getting caught more than he regrets what he did. Sarah nodded slowly. I feel sorry for him. Is that weird? No. That's what makes you different from him. You can still feel empathy, even for someone who tried to destroy you. I pulled her close. That's why you won, Sarah. Not just in court, but in every way that matters. You didn't let him turn you into something you're not. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Detective Torres. They'd uncovered 2 more families Daniel and Chin had targeted before developing their formal operation. The investigation had expanded to include the FBI, looking into potential wire fraud and interstate conspiracy charges. Your documentation was the key to all of this, Torres told me. Without your forensic analysis showing the pattern, we never would have connected these cases. You broke open an operation that was active in 4 states for over a decade. Just doing what accountants do, I said. Following the money. Well, the DA's office wants to hire you as a consultant on 3 other estate fraud cases. Interested? I thought about it. About using my skills to help other families like ours. About turning Daniel's betrayal into something that could protect people. Yeah, I said. I'm interested. Now, 6 months after that morning when Daniel mocked Sarah for having no lawyer, I want you to understand something. This story isn't just about a courtroom victory or a criminal brought to justice. It's about recognizing patterns of predatory behavior before they destroy your family. Daniel Hendricks operated for years because people didn't see the pattern. Families in grief are vulnerable. They want to trust that other family members have good intentions. They want to believe that blood is thicker than greed. Daniel counted on that trust. He weaponized it. If you're dealing with a family estate, watch for these warning signs. A relative who suddenly becomes intensely interested in estate planning during a terminal illness. Pressure to sign documents quickly without time to review them. Accusations of manipulation or undue influence with no real evidence. Legal threats designed to intimidate rather than resolve genuine disputes. A pattern of similar disputes in that person's past. Daniel's mistake was thinking Sarah was powerless without a lawyer. What he didn't understand is that truth doesn't need expensive representation. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it clearly. Sarah stood in that courtroom, a 3rd-grade teacher facing down a top estate attorney, and she didn't back down. She presented the facts. She trusted in justice. And when her own mother turned out to be the judge, she trusted in fairness over favoritism. That's the lesson here. Not that you should represent yourself in court, that's incredibly risky in most cases. But that you should never let someone's expensive lawyer convince you to abandon the truth. You should never let intimidation tactics force you to accept injustice just to make the pain stop. Sarah's father, Robert, spent his life building something meaningful. He worked hard, invested wisely, and wanted his children to benefit from his success. Daniel tried to pervert that legacy into something ugly. But in the end, Robert's gift to his children wasn't just money. It was the values he'd taught them. Sarah learned integrity from her father. She learned courage. She learned that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. And when it counted most, Those lessons saved her. As for me, I learned that being a forensic accountant isn't just about finding numbers that don't add up. It's about recognizing when someone's trying to cheat the system, whether that's a corporation cooking its books or a family member cooking evidence to steal an inheritance. I'm still working with the DA's office on estate fraud cases. We've helped 4 families in the past 6 months, using the same techniques I used to expose Daniel's pattern. Each time we stop someone like him, we protect a family from the kind of betrayal Sarah experienced. And Sarah? She's still teaching 3rd grade at Bear Creek Elementary. Still buying classroom supplies with her own money. Still staying late to help kids who struggle. The inheritance from her father sits in investments, funding her retirement someday and creating a trust for the kids we hope to have. But the real inheritance, the one that really mattered, was already hers. The knowledge that when everything was on the line, she stood up for herself. She faced down her brother's greed, her mother's complicated history, and a legal system designed to intimidate. And she won. Not because she had a fancy lawyer or because the judge happened to be her mother. She won because she had the truth, and she had the courage to speak it. That's what these grandpa stories are really about. Not just crime and justice, but the choices we make when everything's at stake. Do we cave to pressure, or do we stand firm? Do we let ourselves be intimidated, or do we fight back with integrity? Daniel chose money over family. He chose manipulation over honesty. He chose to become a predator feeding on grief. And in the end, those choices destroyed him more completely than any prison sentence ever could. Sarah chose truth. She chose courage. She chose to trust that justice would prevail if she just had the strength to pursue it. And those choices saved her, healed her family, and stopped a predator from hurting anyone else. If you're facing something similar, a family member who's trying to cheat you, a legal situation that seems hopeless, a betrayal that cuts to the bone, remember Sarah's story. Remember that expensive lawyers and intimidation tactics are just noise. The truth cuts through all of it. Document everything. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Look for patterns of behavior, not just isolated incidents. And most importantly, don't give up just because the fight seems hard. Sarah could have settled. She could have given Daniel money just to make the lawsuit go away. Instead, she fought, and in fighting she exposed a criminal operation that had destroyed multiple families. She turned her personal nightmare into justice for people she'd never even met. That's the power of refusing to be a victim. That's what happens when you stand up for what's right, even when it's terrifying. So, I want to hear from you. Have you dealt with family betrayal? Estate disputes? Someone using legal intimidation to steal what's rightfully yours? Drop a comment below sharing your story. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and choosing courage over comfort. Hit that share button because someone in your life might need to hear Sarah's story today. And remember, expensive lawyers are intimidating. Fabricated evidence is frightening. Family betrayal cuts deep. But the truth, spoken clearly by someone with the courage to stand up for themselves, the truth is unstoppable. Daniel Hendricks learned that the hard way. So did Marcus Chin. And so will the next predator who thinks they can weaponize the legal system to steal from vulnerable families. Because somewhere out there, another Sarah is reading this story. Another Marcus is documenting the patterns. Another family is learning that they don't have to accept injustice just because fighting back seems impossible. Justice isn't just what happens in courtrooms. It's what happens when good people refuse to give up. When teachers face down top attorneys. When forensic accountants turn their skills toward protecting the vulnerable. When estranged mothers and daughters find their way back to each other through shared commitment to what's right. That's Sarah's story. That's our story. And it can be yours too. Stay strong out there. Trust your instincts. Document everything. And never, ever let someone's expensive suit convince you that the truth doesn't matter. Because in the end, in that courtroom or outside it, the truth always finds a way to win.